Unit 4.1 Ethical, Legal and Health and Safety Issues in Sport and Exercise Science Research. Key terms and backgrounds. Ethical means a set of morals, principles that govern a person's behavior or the conducting of an activity. It's the right thing to do as it will give the least amount of pain to someone. Legal is when someone is working within the boundaries of the civil law. Health and safety are rules that aim to prevent any accidents which may occur resulting in harm or danger. Who were the Nazis? Nazis were a party led by Adolf Hitler that ruled Germany between 1933 and 1945. They believed in the perfect German race and believed that other people that didn't fit the perfect German model were inferior. They murdered 6 million Jews. In concentration camps, Nazi doctors performed human experiments. Prisoners were experimented upon, resulting in death, disability, and disfigurement. The Nazis hoped to develop chemical weapons, help recovery of Nazi soldiers, and help to advance the Nazi race. What is the Nuremberg Code? The Nuremberg Code was developed in August 1947 after the Nuremberg trials. In these trials, a Nazi doctor was convicted of the crimes committed during the human experiments on the concentration camp prisoners. The Nuremberg Code tried to set clear rules about what is legal to do when conducting a human experiment. It consists of 10 points, which are: must give an informed consent, the results of the experiment must be for the greater good of the society, human experiments should be based on previous animal experiments, experiments should be conducted by avoiding physical or mental harm, no experiments should be conducted if it is believed to cause death or disability, the risk should never exceed the benefits, safe and proper equipment and facilities should be used to protect the participants, experiments should be conducted only by a qualified scientist, subjects should be able to end their participation at any time, and finally, the scientist in charge must be prepared to terminate the experiment where injury or death is likely to occur. What is the Declaration of Helsinki? The Declaration of Helsinki is the formal statement of ethical principles by the World Medical Association. Although it's not a legal document, it has been incorporated into many government laws. It includes principles on safeguarding research subjects, ensuring consent is given, minimizing risks to patients, conforming to the approved research protocol. The declaration is the basis of worldwide medical ethic. What is basis? The British Association of Sport and Exercise Science (BASIS) made a code of conduct that governs how far an exercise scientist work as researchers. The code of conduct outlines ethical and legal issues that are essential for safe research for sports and exercise science. The code of conduct consists of ethical clearance, informed consent, confidentiality of all the Data Protection Act 1998, and finally the safety of the participants acting due regards for equality. Scenario 1. Scenario 1 Evaluation. Good practice. The good practice was the parents' consent as the beginning of the session, as it ensures that the participants' parents are aware and are allowing the experiment to take place. However, the consent was very general. The researcher also had the correct qualifications to carry out the experiment, meaning that they are legally qualified for the experiment to take place. Bad practices. The bad practices that occurred in the scenario 1 were they didn't get the subject's permission, which is illegal and unethical, which could lead to the researcher being fined or the termination of their job. To prevent this from happening, the researcher can ask the participant for their consent to the experiment being conducted on them and that they know what is going to happen. The person that was taking part in the experiment wasn't a volunteer and was forced into doing the experiment. This is unethical, and if the participant doesn't want to care about the experiment, it may produce invalid results. To prevent this from happening, the researcher could ask if the participant is fine with carrying out the experiment, and if not, they can stop at any time and make them feel comfortable to pull out of the experiment. If at any time the participant is considering not doing it, then the researcher has to stop the experiment at once. If during the experiment the participant wanted to stop participating and the researcher made fun of them and continued not allowing them to the right to withdraw, this is unethical. To prevent this, the researcher can ask the client or at the beginning of the experiment if they consent to taking part in the experiment, and if the client shows any hesitation, should ask them if they are still happy to do it, and if they say they don't want to do it anymore, the researcher has to stop immediately. They also didn't include at the beginning and end of their test a briefing and debriefing. This prevented the participant from knowing what was going on and what would happen with the results, and whether they go with this is illegal. As you're not allowed to keep information from the participants, which is going against the Declaration of Helsinki. The researcher also didn't do a Data Protection Act by keeping the data secure with the participants and not releasing it to the other participants or general public, and this is illegal. To prevent this from happening, the researcher can record the data in private and not show it to anyone other than the participants and the researchers, and sign a data protection form before the session to make sure that they won't release the data to the general public. The researcher also showed disrespect towards the participants. For example, when the participant wanted to drop out, the researcher made fun of them and told them to carry on and don't be a baby, which is unethical and inhuman. To prevent this, the researcher could read the ethical principles which will teach them how to behave and treat participants correctly. The researcher didn't give a full informed consent paperwork, which is illegal and can result in a fine or termination of job. To prevent this, the researcher can give them informed consent and key paperwork before the session starts and get the participant to sign that they have given consent for the research to carry out the experiment. The researcher also didn't keep the data confidentiality, which is the participants' data and results. from the test which was conducted. To prevent this, the researcher can keep all the data secure and in a safe or so that nobody else sees and reads it. The next poor practice was that the researcher didn't have a first aid kit on standby. This is essential as it has the items you would need if an injury occurred. To prevent this from happening again, the researcher should bring a portable first aid kit along with them and attend a first aid course which will tell the researcher what to do whenever an injury situation occurs. The final poor practice was he didn't have an ethical clearance. This is a statement that has to be granted to you from the intuitional ethics, and only when your experiment has been fully approved you are allowed to perform the experiment. To stop this from happening, the researcher must make sure that before the experiment even takes place that the experiment has been granted ethical clearance. Consequences. There are many consequences which could occur from the poor practice in scenario 1. Firstly, if the subject hasn't granted permission, it may result in the participant not knowing or understanding what they are getting themselves into. This may cause the participant to become worried or start to feel nervous about the situation. They could also start to feel that they have no choice and are being forced to continue doing the experiment. This could also lead to the participant being less productive and harder to work with, resulting in invalid results. This is also bad for the researcher as it's very unethical of the researcher to not ask for the participant's permission, which could find the researcher going to court and paying a fine and maybe termination of his job. Similarly, if the participant didn't volunteer for the experiment but got made to do it as the participant didn't give the permission for the researcher to do the experiment on them, and could result in the researcher going to court as they were forced to do the experiment, which is going against the Nuremberg Code. As the first point states that the participant must volunteer for the experiment to be carried out, if the researcher didn't give the participant the right to withdraw, then the participant can start to feel like they are forced to continue with the experiment, which is unethical as the researcher is taking away the participant's free will, causing the participant to get anxious about continuing. This would mean that the researcher could go to court and be asked to attend an ethical training day, which will inform him what is the right thing to do in those situations. It could also result in a small fine. If the researcher doesn't include a briefing at the beginning and debriefing at the end, then the participant doesn't know what they are getting themselves into and could sign up for something they don't want to do as a result of no briefing or at the beginning. This could refuse the participant if they thought they were signing. This could confuse the participant if they thought they were signing up for something else, which could cause the participant to start to panic and worry about what they are doing in the experiment. This could affect the researcher as the participant could be unwilling to take part in the experiment, meaning he couldn't finish his experiment